The stable door was already shut when Nathaniel Cross stepped inside. For one awful heartbeat, it felt as though he had closed it himself. The air was thick with heat, and the sour smell of hay left too long in the sun. Dust floated in the narrow beams of light that slipped through the wooden slats, and there, in the corner of the stall, sat a young woman with her knees drawn tightly to her chest. Her name, he would soon learn, was Eliza Hale. She wore a torn, dirt-stained dress that barely reached her thighs. Faded bruises bloomed across her legs in ugly shades of purple and yellow. When Nathaniel's shadow crossed her, she flinched, not startled, not surprised, prepared. He removed his hat slowly, lowering himself just enough so he wouldn't tower over her. His eyes caught the details one by one, the iron ring bolted into the wall, the short chain lying in the straw. The deep red marks circling her wrists, the latch on the outside of the door. She tried to speak. The first attempt died in her throat, the second came out thin and cracked. "My father." Three shallow cuts were carved into the wooden post beside her. "Clean, deliberate, evenly spaced. Morning, midday, night. He drinks," she whispered. "Then he comes." Nathaniel felt something twist inside him, not just anger, something heavier, shame. He knew her father, Jeremiah Hale. A small-time cattle trader with a sharp temper and louder debts. Jeremiah had told everyone in town that his daughter was unstable, sickly, dramatic, but this was not sickness, this was control. Outside, boots scraped against gravel. Jeremiah was returning from the well. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He had once watched another man's cruelty and said nothing. That silence had haunted him for years, not again. "So tell me, when a man finds a daughter locked in a stall by her own blood, does he respect the law or does he break it?" Before we step any deeper into this dust and danger, take a moment to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Because what happens next will test more than fists, it will test a town's conscience. Jeremiah stopped 3 paces from the stable when he saw Nathaniel standing there. He smiled, but it never reached his eyes. And that was when the real storm began. Jeremiah Hale set the water bucket down slowly, as if nothing in the world were out of place. "Hot day makes her restless," he said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Girl's got a wild streak." Nathaniel didn't answer immediately. He stepped slightly to the side, just enough to block Jeremiah's view inside the stall. "She's locked in," Nathaniel said quietly. Jeremiah shrugged. "She runs. I keep her close. That's called raising a child." Behind Nathaniel, Eliza didn't cry, she didn't beg. She sat in silence, watching like someone who had learned that words only made things worse. Nathaniel inhaled slowly. "I came for the gray gelding," he said evenly. "I'll take him and I'll hire your daughter for the drive back to my ranch, pay her fare." Jeremiah's smile thinned. "She ain't for hire. She ain't livestock either." That was the spark. Jeremiah lunged without warning, whiskey breath and fury. The first punch struck Nathaniel's shoulder. The second missed as Nathaniel caught him by the shirt collar and drove him back against the stable wall. The wood rattled. A horse kicked wildly in its stall. Dust exploded into the air. Jeremiah swung blindly, desperate and sloppy. Nathaniel kept his movements tight, controlled, one solid blow to the ribs. A shove that sent Jeremiah crashing into a feed barrel. For a split second, everything froze. Then Eliza moved, not boldly, not dramatically. She grabbed a fistful of straw and flung it into her father's face. It was clumsy, desperate. But it was enough. Jeremiah coughed and staggered back. Nathaniel seized the key hanging from a nail and unlocked the stall door. The metal creaked as it swung open. Eliza stood slowly, legs trembling beneath her. When she stepped forward, she didn't look at her father. She walked straight past him. Jeremiah wiped his eyes, rage burning through the haze. "You'll regret this," he spat. "You think this is over?" Nathaniel helped Eliza into his wagon without another word. As they rolled away, she didn't look back, but Jeremiah did. He stood in the yard, breathing hard, something cold and calculating settling behind his eyes. Not fists now, not shouting, paper, law, revenge. Nathaniel felt it in his bones. The fight in the stable had been the easy part. And as the wagon wheels carried them toward the horizon, he had no idea that by morning the whole town would be waiting. Because Jeremiah Hale wasn't done, not even close. They crossed the shallow bend of the river just before sunset. The wagon wheels groaned over stone, and Eliza sat beside Nathaniel wrapped in an old canvas coat that smelled faintly of leather and smoke. She held the edges of it tightly like it might disappear if she loosened her grip. Nathaniel didn't question her, didn't press. Silence, he knew, could sometimes feel safer than kindness. By the time his ranch came into view, the sky had turned the color of fading embers. He handed her a tin cup of water before he spoke. "You're safe here," he said. She nodded. But her eyes drifted toward the horizon as if safety were something that expired at sundown. That evening, when the shadows stretched long across the yard, she stiffened suddenly. Nathaniel noticed the way her breath changed, quick, shallow. One of the hours, he said nothing about it. Instead, he handed her a sack of feed. "Help me with the horses. Keep moving, keep breathing, break the clock." They worked side by side until the sky went dark and no locked door opened. No boots approached, no chains scraped against wood. Something shifted in her shoulders, not relief, not yet, but doubt. The next morning, Nathaniel rode into town. Sheriff Walter Boone leaned back in his chair, boots resting against his desk. He listened carefully as Nathaniel spoke about the chain, the marks, the three carved lines. Walter's jaw tightened. "You stepped into trouble," he muttered. "I know." The sheriff leaned forward slowly. "Jeremiah filed a complaint at dawn. Says you kidnapped his daughter." There it was, not fists, paper. "Men at the Silver Spur back him," Walter added. "Owes them favors." Nathaniel exhaled slowly. "In this county," the sheriff continued carefully, "a father's word carries weight, weight heavier than bruises." When Nathaniel returned to the ranch, he found Eliza standing by the fence, staring down the long dirt road. She didn't turn when he approached. "He won't stop," she whispered. As if summoned by her fear, a thin line of dust appeared far in the distance. Nathaniel narrowed his eyes. 3 riders, Jeremiah in front, 2 men behind him. And this time they weren't coming to talk. The dust grew thicker as it rolled toward the ranch, and Eliza didn't run. She simply stood there, still, like someone who had spent years learning there was nowhere to go, and Nathaniel realized something then. The next fight wouldn't be inside a stable. It would be in front of witnesses, and not all of them would be on his side. The riders pulled into the yard hard, horses snorting, dust rising around them like smoke after gunfire. Jeremiah Hale swung down from his saddle first. His lip was still swollen from the day before, a thin line of dried blood dark against his chin. But his eyes were clear, too clear. "You've got something that belongs to me," he called out. Nathaniel stepped off the porch, calm as still water. "She ain't a saddle," he replied. One of the men behind Jeremiah spat into the dirt. "This doesn't have to turn ugly." But it already had. Eliza stepped out onto the porch. She stayed behind Nathaniel, yet she didn't hide. Her hands trembled, but her chin lifted just slightly. Jeremiah saw it. And for a flicker of a second, his control cracked. "You think he'll keep you?" he sneered at her. "You think this rancher wants your trouble?" Nathaniel didn't look back. "You filed your complaint. Sheriff knows where she is. We can settle this in town." Jeremiah laughed low and sharp. "We'll settle it right here." He moved first, a shove, a swing. One of the hired men tried circling toward the porch. Nathaniel reacted without hesitation, driving his shoulder into Jeremiah and sending both of them crashing into the dust. No gunshots, no drawn steel, just fists, breath, grit between teeth. Jeremiah fought wild rage and humiliation fueling him. Nathaniel fought steady. One solid punch split Jeremiah's lip again. Another sent him flat on his back, staring up at the merciless sky. The second rider stepped forward and Eliza moved. She grabbed a fence post, holding it like a spear, and shouted for them to stop. Her voice cut through the chaos, strong, unbroken. The hired men hesitated. Jeremiah lay there, chest heaving, eyes burning with something darker than pain. "You don't understand," he muttered. Nathaniel paused. "Understand what?" Jeremiah's gaze flicked toward Eliza. "She signed it." Silence fell heavier than the dust. "Signed what?" Jeremiah pushed himself up slowly, wiping blood from his mouth. "You want law," he said quietly now. "Fine, let's bring it to town." The riders mounted without another word and turned back toward the road. Eliza lowered the fence post. "He made me sign something," she whispered. Nathaniel felt the ground shift beneath him. This had never been only about control, it was about land. And land could turn a father into something far worse than a drunk. By morning, they would be standing in front of a judge, and if that paper held power, everything could be taken from her all over again. Dodge City felt different the next morning, not louder, not rougher, just heavier. People stood in small clusters outside the sheriff's office, murmuring behind half-raised hands. News traveled fast in a town like this. Faster than truth ever could. Inside, Jeremiah Hale stood stiffly near the wall, a bandage across his lip and pride stitched even tighter. Eliza stood a few feet away, hands steady at her sides. Nathaniel did not speak for her. He stood beside her, and somehow that meant more. Sheriff Walter Boone laid the folded document on his desk. The paper looked ordinary, harmless, ink and signatures, but it carried the weight of a prison. "A transfer of property," Walter said slowly. "Your late mother's river land, Miss Hale." Eliza's fingers twitched, but she did not look down. Jeremiah cleared his throat. "Family agreement." She signed it proper. Nathaniel watched her carefully. The room felt too small, too hot. Walter's voice softened. "Did you sign this freely?" The silence stretched. Outside, a wagon rattled past. Somewhere down the street, a saloon door slammed. Eliza lifted her chin. "No, just one word, clear, no trembling, no tears." Jeremiah's composure cracked like dry wood. "She's confused," he snapped. "Ungrateful, I raised her." Walter's eyes hardened. "Raising a child doesn't involve chains and locked doors." A murmur rippled through the doorway. Jeremiah stepped forward, anger blazing, but this time no one moved aside for him. Walter signaled his deputy. "Jeremiah Hale, you're being held pending investigation for unlawful confinement and coercion." The words echoed. For the first time, Jeremiah looked uncertain, not furious, not loud, small. As they let him out, he cast one last glare at Eliza, but it held no power now. Outside, the town watched in stunned silence as the man who once commanded fear was marched down the steps. Inside, Eliza swayed slightly as though years of tension had finally loosened all at once. Nathaniel steadied her gently. "It's over," he said quietly, but she shook her head. "No," she whispered, "it's starting," and she was right. Because freedom isn't a door thrown open. It's a step taken forward when every part of you expects to be dragged back. So let me leave you with this. Where in your life are you still counting marks on a post? And what would happen if today you chose to say one word strong enough to change everything? The dust settles, but the courage, that's what lingers.